Robert Feeney, it is so great to have you here as a guest of
Thank you, Lee.
Business Spotlight. You're very welcome. So we're both located in Wichita, Kansas, which for the rest of the world is right smack dab in the United States. So you never know who is going to be consuming this video and the content that comes from it. So very nice to have you here as our guest. I can't wait to ask you these questions and for you to let the world know what's going on with the amazing company and the cool name you have, Ringorang. So if that's okay, I'd like to go ahead and just start asking you some questions, beginning
Sure.
with, tell us what you do at Ringorang and for how long?
Yeah, Ringorang, it was a play on the word boomerang, of course. So the idea is with this software, which is what Ringorang is, it's a solution that we offer to large scale organizations so that they can send out a quick request for action and it comes back with data on what people are doing about it, like what they know or don't know about it and what they're doing. And that serves as a kind of loop they can keep going over the course of days, weeks, and months on a journey to habit formation.
Okay.
So it is, in effect, it's a behavior change software. And we're really out to developing the most significant behavior technology solution of the 21st century here. We've had some really interesting background that's gotten us here, which we can talk about a bit. And
Okay.
this software has been in existence for over a decade. However, the business that I started around it only was a few years ago, and it's called Knowledge as a Service. Our whole effort is to turn knowledge in large organizations into habits.
I love that. So tell us a little bit more, if you don't mind, about what got it here, because you say you mentioned some things. It doesn't just happen spontaneously. Well, maybe it did through the universe and everything, but what was that?
You mean what brought it into existence in the
Yes,
first
and that
place?
wasn't one of my
Yeah.
questions that I sent you, but
Well, like you heard my grandiose statement about building the most significant behavior technology solution of the 21st century. I mean, that's very grandiose, but the reason that we put something so big out there like that, like other big ideas, they often come
mhm.
by accident or something like an accident.
Right, right.
Ours was no exception. It was over 15 years ago. There was an idea that came up when I was in Hollywood. I came from entertainment and marketing and advertising being the modality we took into Ringorang.
Okay.
What came up that brought it into existence was the need for advertisers to get people to come back to a campaign over and over again
Okay.
because they wanted to influence of course, their consumer habits. They want them to take a certain consumer action, buy this, don't buy that, come back to this often, et cetera. The challenge that they had and continue to have is how do you get people to come back more than once? So for
Mhm.
instance, you go over to a Hershey's campaign, it's about kisses or whatnot, and you fill in the form for being part of a sweepstakes, and then you leave. That's it. Hopefully you win.
Right. Unless I win, I won't hear from you again and have no reason to go back. No
That's
reason to
right.
change my behavior, which is
No,
what
it's like
you're, yeah.
they might be lucky just that one hit maybe
Hmm.
happens to show up when you're shopping for chocolate or something like that, but it's not very often
Okay.
a one hit is going to make it. So there's a lot of science and around how many hits it takes before somebody's going to take an action. Some in marketing say it takes 8 times. There's
Hmm.
there's there's certain myths around like it takes 21 days to form a habit, although that's not a myth entirely. It's very specific how that 21 days has to be spent. Usually more 2 to 8 months. So back to how we got started
Hmm.
was, well, we were working with the Coca-Cola company at the time and the James Bond integration that they had to try to get someone to go back to a campaign 10 times instead of once. And it was, so my business partner, BW Barkley, he's a native of Wichita, Kansas, was out in Hollywood. And we came together on this idea. Then his idea was, we're going to create a gamified way, using game-based mechanics to
Hmm.
get people to go back over and over again. Well, it worked and it didn't work. It was early stage prototype software we created. It was very expensive to run and we didn't have a business model around it. And
Oh,
we
such a
hit the
great
recession,
entrepreneurial story. Yes.
right?
No business
And then you
plan.
get, and we're like, who's going to pay for this? And this like a recession's going on and no one wants to pay us more than like $5,000 for this really expensive software. So we said, all right, it was a good idea
Hmm.
anyway. And
Okay.
we moved on. But just before we hung up the idea, it was a fellow who'd given us some money to try out this prototype, happened to be the chief information officer of a large scale utility in the state of Washington.
Okay.
And he said, look, if you can get people to go back to a Coke campaign over and over again, can you get my IT employees to go to their dang training? Because we're about to get audited on
Okay.
critical infrastructure and
Mm,
cybersecurity and stuff. And we're like, hey, I don't know anything about that. But if you'll pay us, I promise we'll
yes.
learn, you know?
Yes. The answer is yes.
So that's what got the whole ball rolling. And it took us through so many different paces, including government grants and everything with the US Department of Energy, which we can talk about if you'd like, that brought us all the way up to forming a company finally 3 years ago around a business model on a proven technology that you can actually shift people's behaviors if you take them through something like a drip journey where only just you're nudging them for 1 minute at a time every so often on the in-between moments of their day. And if you've got that map to what behaviors you're trying to drive, you can do it and you can do it assuredly, but you got to follow what the data tells you. And that's really the science that we build over
Okay.
the years.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Ooh, I love that. It's such a great story. And I did share
Yeah.
with BW a software, a program that I use. It's called Quality Mind. I'm not trying to advertise something else on here, but it reminds me throughout the day to meditate. So I stop
Yeah, very good.
and I meditate, and I use some of the other tools. There are about 5 or 6 integrated tools within the app, and I've thought I don't know how I can live without it now, because it's,
Right?
yeah, that has what has become of it.
You know, it's behavior technology is not a new idea. There's a term called human performance technology that's been around for 100 years now. Started with the military, like a lot of technologies do, and where they were trying to figure out how do you deal with high stress situations like being up in the air in an airplane, which was relatively new 100 years ago, right?
Right.
And it's like, so how do you build technology
Mhm.
around them that helps them deal with their stresses in the right way? So 100 years later, we got wearables, we got things, we got apps, that are talking to us at such a frequency now. And if you can create a technology that successfully cuts through the clutter
Right.
and gives you the empowerment to do something that you want to do, but you usually don't think you have the time or the tools to do it, pretty soon you're meditating. Pretty soon you've got mindfulness in your day.
That's
You
right.
found some peace.
Mhm.
That's it's a great place to be right now.
It really is. And I wonder about the noise you mentioned. I wonder how,
Mhm.
if this will get noisy too. It's like, oh, I don't need
Oh, yeah,
that,
that's right.
performance behavior integration thing. I need something else or whatever.
Right.
But maybe we learn it and then we move on and add something new to our life and continue to grow our behavioral opportunities, just like we grow our learning. I just made that up, but I thought it sounded really cool as I think about how
Yeah.
this is going to go in the next 30 years, 40 years, 100 years. It's really exciting. Well,
Yeah, well, what you intuited there is what is so for all of us. It's absolutely scientifically speaking too. And there are also some interesting stats on. We use some gamification techniques, as I mentioned in ours, to keep people incentivized to keep
right.
coming back. That's the idea, is just keep them coming back. And casual games, for example, will crown, no matter how good the game is, people will be done with it in on average about 3 months. You're
Okay.
done playing it. It's like, all
All
right,
right.
I've gotten everything I can out of that. I'm moving on to something else. Well, the same applies to almost anything, including trainings, including what's going to cause me to be more mindful. You're going to move on after a certain crown period. And it's important to have built into your engagement model the knowledge that that's going to happen and not freak out about it.
Yeah, right.
Make it
How
part of the
how
model.
how soon do you think it'll be? I don't. What are your aspirations about making this mainstream for smaller companies? I know you're working with very large companies at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good, the way you ask the question is interesting too, because there's this theory in business that you've got the head of the comet, is what you're going after. That's the white hot center of your market, and then you've got what's called the long tail,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So the long tail here would be for us small businesses, and we've done some tests with some small businesses. In fact, we even did one right when we came into town in Wichita too. Every so often we try it again to see, do we have an approach, a coaching process, a support process, and actually the technology interface is such that a small business can get the same benefits as a large scale organization. And the answer right now for us is yes and no.
Okay.
It really comes down to the what they're trying to cause to change in the organization, and do they really have the buy-in from leadership to cause that change and stick it out for over the course of 3 months, 6 months, a year. And a lot of times smaller businesses are working in a more agile fashion. I should say more of an ad hoc fashion rather than agile. Agile is a methodology now, but and they oftentimes are shifting and moving very fast. So sometimes that doesn't work if they're not taking what they've built in Ringorang along with them and levering it up and stair stepping it up. Larger organizations tend to do that more procedurally. It's like, okay, we take what we did and then we're going to move it up. Not all the time. Sometimes they end up dropping stuff and then moving on again, whatever the next shiny thing is.
Right.
But that's where we found our mainstream. So to get across the long tail to small businesses, I think it's probably going to take some clearer and stronger processes on our part to be able to take a lot of the content development off of their hands and then be able to coach them up on how to keep it going to hit their performance.
Okay.
It's just some fine tuning over maybe 2 years
Mm-hmm.
from now is my guess.
And then also discovering the undiscovered that we don't know, we'll figure out something, so good. Awesome. So right now, who is your best customer? If your best customer walked in the door and you could be happy as heck and working with them and making them helping them achieve the goals they want to achieve, who is that? What do they look like?
Well, it's large scale organizations that have a problem around performance that they've been trying to work at for a while and they don't quite know how to get there. So an example of that, I would say our best customer is IBM. Because they've really worked with us over the last 3 years to try to bring this into their environment, scale it globally, and they've to the point where they've wrapped around it a methodology, or it's actually an approach that they call performance first learning.
Okay.
As opposed to learning first learning, which is you try to get all the learning in people's heads that you possibly can, it's like stuff your PowerPoints and do what you can. But what we found is that doesn't get people there because most of it sheds right off of you and you feel a little disempowered by the whole experience and you feel you had to take time out of work and now you just got to go into work and survive and figure it out. That's not a great model, but it's the common model that all of us operate on. So we came into existence to solve that, and IBM really helped us refine where, and that's going right up here to the front of where the front lines of performance. What's expected of human beings, and then just reverse engineer far enough into what habits have to be formed to deliver those results. Forget all the learning you think everyone needs to know over here. Just what habits have to be done over and over. And those are attitude habits, skill habits, and knowledge habits. That's what we call the ASK methodology, ASK.
Okay.
And we found attitudes are really the key. So the perfect customer for us is the large organization that sees the benefit and the cost. The benefit of having people performing in an empowered way that hits the KPIs for the organization, what we call performance, right? And that they're willing to go through the journey that's needed to cause that to happen, right? That's our perfect. So, IBM is the reason they're such a good example is because they really have wrapped the whole initiative of performance first around what Ringorang does for them. And they're saying, this is how we do things here.
That's great. And they're innovative too. IBM, you can't be in business as long as IBM without continuous innovation, and they have been.
That's right.
For sure.
That's exactly right. And they went through ups and downs in that, and they've acknowledged that. It's like they got to the point where they were thought of as the non-innovator for a while. They've been around, they're Big Blue for 100 years, right?
Right.
But they really turned that around.
I remember that. I kind of remember that time. So your business started right around when COVID was everywhere, right? What did you have to do to respond to COVID during that time?
When I stopped biting my hand.
Wow.
It was, in fact, I remember our one of our biggest customer contracts. We actually got locked down in what I think it was February or March, like right when COVID hit and the lockdowns happened. And then everything got tabled for about 6 months before they finally came back. So all of our projections for the year completely went down the tube. We were in survival mode trying to figure out, and we thought, well, we've got this virtual experience that we do. It's a technology that pops up in people's life, right? We don't need to be brick and mortar. This is great for COVID. Well, it was good in theory, but the problem was supply chains all went to sleep. Like
That's
nobody
right.
was picking up new anything.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm, mhm.
and so that it didn't work. And so we survived it simply because we're absolutely relentless. And we knew that this needed to live in the world. And we'd had already a number of years of proof that it would do what we said it would do. And that gave us a lot of confidence to go forward. And once we emerged, supply
Mhm.
chains came back
Yeah.
about 6 to 8 months later, and we were good.
Hang on through that time. I think there'll be a lot of stories in 20, 40, 50 years about how hanging on through COVID was a cool thing for businesses and those that were able to do it, because many people have really done well because they've had to shift even so slightly, just being more patient around suppliers or being more patient around dealing with employees that don't want to come into the office every day. So I think those are
And
the great things, some of the great things that we learned that will have a long time impact on businesses. And there'll be a lot of stories told in history books about it, business books.
I agree. It
Mhm.
certainly challenged grit, didn't it?
Right. Ooh, yes.
Among other
And still,
things.
yeah. So since you've been doing this, what's been your biggest learning? And I know that's a hard question to ask, but what has been your biggest learning? Because you're in a different role than you've ever been. And what is the role you are in this company? What's your title?
Yeah, I'm Chief Vision Officer. I
Okay.
mean, I'm actually the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO, which is a commonly known title, but there was something that Simon Sinek said that I really resonated with, which is we should actually call Chief Executive Officers Chief Vision Officers to be more specific about what we do. We set a vision, and then we make sure that the company fulfills on the vision and doesn't go outside the vision, or we evolve it if we need
Right.
to. But it's really ours to lead. So I would say the biggest learning that I've had is learning how to be a leader.
Okay.
Leadership is, in my vernacular, and very different from management. And I discovered when I realized that I was trying to collapse those together to be a leader and a manager at the same time, that things weren't working. When
Mm,
I pulled them apart and realized that management and leadership management is like get things, simplistic way of saying is like get things done, get them on time, get them on budget, cause things to move forward rhythmically, hit your KPIs. Leadership is about fulfilling the vision and advancing to the next field and tying that together with where you've been, enrolling your teams and helping people understand how they're a contributor to that. It's a lot of communication. And when I pulled those apart, I realized I'm lousy as a manager and I'm potentially very good at being a leader. And so this is what I started leaning into.
oh,
Biggest
I
learning
love
I've had.
it. That's a great. I'm gonna have to steal a lot of that because it was a good description of why they can't blend. It's like sort of
Mhm.
it's being pregnant and not pregnant. You either are or you are not.
That's
Can't do good
interesting.
with right?
And well, another dynamic way of looking at it, at least from my view, is that management looks in
Mm.
and leadership looks out. It's like leadership is looking out to the next place you got to get to. Management necessarily has to be very inwardly focused and make sure that the machine's running.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hmm. Good for you for growing into that role and recognizing at this stage in your career and in the business. It's sooner better than later. The other thing I was going to say, CEO is like the task side of the visionary. You still need it, but you really want the CVO to be running the organization.
That's right.
There's
And so
still the executive, but just the tasks, right?
that's right. Well, in our case, so that's not every company does this, but some of them do. We have it that the COO and the CEO truly are different. Sometimes you'll see it like CEO and president,
Hmm.
or you just have a CEO and they do everything. Often in
Hmm.
small companies, it's like that.
Right.
But that's that pull apart we realized needed to happen. So I went to the vision leadership side, and my business partner is on execution.
Yep. Yep. So different too. So good.
So
Um,
different.
so we're going to be publishing this interview in a newsletter. Is there anything you would want to promote in it in our newsletter? So what they'll do is they'll take your words, my words, and they'll put them in print, and they'll go out into a newsletter. So you can promote if you wanted to promote something. What would it be, or any kind of offer?
What I'd love to do is share something.
Okay.
There's what's got me so excited right now, as an entrepreneur, I'm excited when there's an opportunity to impact something or change something, and maybe in a different way. So, what there is an opportunity right now that's all of us are facing is how to solve the workforce crisis. And the
Hmm.
way it shows up for most of us is something like, oh, we're not finding enough competent workers. Or it shows up as not enough people want to work anymore. Or something like that.
I've been
It
hearing that a
usually has a
lot.
bit of, right? And it has a bit of mystery and a bit of judgment in it. You know, it's like there's something's wrong. There must be something wrong with people nowadays or something. I think that's a distraction. And that's what I want to share. There is a
Okay.
solution that I'm finding is calling forth to be our approach in our software. So this is why I'm promoting it here. Their workforce development has a gap in it that is square. We're looking to fill squarely here. And we've got some tests running and some successes already that we're to try to solve this on eventually a global level. The gap in workforce development is where learning ends and performance is expected. So put that into a situation like you're trying to get people out of high school and into the workforce, or into higher education and into the workforce, right? You're trying to get them out of schooling.
Right.
And what happens, learning ends, and then they're expected to perform in the world. Well, what's missing there is the bridge that takes them all the way through their new life after learning, which is career or something like that, right? And we don't actually have connective tissue that works effectively and quantifiably in that transition. And that is where we observed is the crisis happening.
Okay.
It's in the transition. So you've got people that are coming out of school, and a lot of them are making choices to not go into the workforce. They're seeing how their parents went through it, and they're like, I don't want to be part of that.
Right.
That sounds like nonsense. I'll be a TikTok star, or I'm going to figure out how to gig. You know, I'm going to do something different than that grind. And here's why the problem is there is because that grind, which has been going on for multiple generations now, is a disempowerment exercise of fire hosing people with learning, including in schools. You're getting fire hosed with this. You can't positively retain it.
Let alone
I mean, how much
it, right?
let alone apply it. Thank you. Exactly. And yet, exactly what you're being asked to do in the world to be successful is to apply it. Could you ask for a more disempowering
No.
model
No.
than that?
No.
So what's in the gap? What's in the gap is the connective tissue of you need to continue to re-engage the human mind every day, multiple times a day, handing someone a wrench when they need a wrench, handing someone a way to have a conversation when they're in the flow of having those conversations, inviting people to try something that's outside their routine when it's least comfortable to do so. And that only happens when you nudge people over and over such that they get familiarity. And familiarity is the environment in which people will try something. You're probably hearing where my roots come from, which is the advertising model.
Yep.
When advertising is done well, we've been nudged so many times that when we're at the store, we're going to grab Doritos instead of the other corn chip because of familiarity.
Absolutely. I also think that the bridge you talked about it's hard to train to that bridge. How are we ever going to train to that bridge when everything's changing so quickly, and I mean all the different platforms and the different places and the different things and the speed of movement that we have today? How can you possibly train to that? So you've got to behaviorally.
So good. Yeah.
So
that's a really intuitive question. That's great. It's so the way we look at it is that storm of interactions that you have with apps and technologies and systems and people, because now we've got Facebook and LinkedIn, we're constantly re-engaging with people much more than we would normally, right? That's not going to slow down.
No.
That's going to keep going. It'll get more proliferate. So what has to happen is people are either going to shut it off. Some people will do that, but most will not. So for the most, what you have to do is have ways to cut through the clutter and offer someone a way to deal with the storm effectively. And that's what's not totally clear in most of our lives. And it's really what we're up to. The most significant behavioral technology solution of the 21st century is going to have to be one where it cuts through and invites you to try something relevant to you, like what you're really up to at this moment, and find it in the storm.
Yeah. It's almost,
you know what I mean? It's like there's 1,000 places you could go. You got to be able to pick it out and say that.
It's almost the opposite of quick bits of information that you get and they're gone. It's the opposite.
No, because that's too much.
And it's a storm.
It's got to have a map. It has
Mhm.
to have a map to it. And that's what we learned. We actually took our technology through 5 years of behavior research studies with federal government, national laboratories, and universities to really get at how do you map under the hood of a technology like this, all of those nudges, so that they're actually driving a familiarity pattern that has a person eventually try something that's empowering for them and has them know how to go into the storm and find the things that are relevant and useful to them, and the other stuff can fade away.
Mm. Such good stuff. I love it.
Cool, isn't it?
Thank you so much for that, for the insight you're delivering today.
Yeah.
So I feel like I don't. I think I'll ask you my last question, and that's, what is the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to learn more about what you're doing, or if they just want to connect with you because you're going a place that people may want to follow and watch. So what? How?
Oh, cool. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. Yeah, I mean, certainly from just to connect with me personally, probably if you don't have a referral to meet me, then go onto LinkedIn.
Okay.
You'll find me there. And then just to see more about what we're up to, you could always go to our website, which is ringorang.com, Ringorang, Ringorang.
Okay, I'll add those to the information here on this video and also in the newsletter so that people can have it to be able to
Cool.
reach out to you. So, Robert, thank you. This time went by so fast for me. I think I could spend a couple of more hours just asking you a lot of questions. So, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on the business. And I'm looking forward to really, really great Ringorang things in the future.
Yes, more ring-a-ranging. Thanks
Yes,
so much, Lee.
you bet.
Yeah, I
Talk to you.
appreciate your interest, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these groundbreaking things come into light in the mainstream, as you put it, so that it just becomes a
Yes, yes,
norm. Like we
yes.
can all take on new behaviors at will.
Love it. Thank you. I'll be talking to you soon. Bye bye.